How do you lead your team to success? Leaders can come in many forms. It could be that you are a formal leader, meaning you have a position as a leader, like a manager, a team leader, a business head. It could also be that you're a temporary leader, meaning you run a project, you've got a task to coordinate and collect some information within the department. Whatever it is, if you are taking your job seriously, it is because you have been delegated this task by a superior manager. And very often, leaders ask themselves many questions about themselves, like these. What can I do today? Where is my team? What is my role in relationship to this team? And how can I really help them to be successful? You see, these are four questions, very important, that maybe you're asking yourself these questions every morning, and that is okay. Because if you are a leader, then you are concerned how your team is going to be successful. But what is really behind this is the core question every leader asks themselves, and that is, what is the true role of the leader of a team? Because in your team, you've got many specialists, and they've been recruited so that the task can be fulfilled successfully. But what about you? What is your role in leading this team and making this team successful? You might be asking yourself. Well, this was the key question when I was coaching and training a group of managers, from the management team to the middle management and even down to the temporary leaders and specialists here in this building. Every month for the period of 2 years, I went to coach and train these leaders around the question, well, what is really your role as a leader? And we had many points to discuss. We were discussing about, yes, leaders have to be communicators and decision makers and coaches. And after the period of 2 years, while this company increased their efficiency by nearly 50% in revenue and bottom line, I remember when I was packing up, driving, ready to drive home, one of their leaders, Raymond, he came up to me and said, Colin, now I understand what my role as a leader is. It is not like I really have to step back and let my team continue with what they're doing. In fact, my role is to help the team to become better at what they're doing without getting involved in all the operational tasks. Raymond was so pleased that he actually made a terrific career development from being a project manager to being the head of a global business. And what we learned here together with this group of top managers and middle management was, what is really the role of a leader? And I've been looking for this definition, and I found one that suited me very well, which I'm going to share with you here right now. Leadership is about getting a group of people to achieve common goals. I like this type of definition because it doesn't really cover or touch the personality of a leader. It touches and describes the role of the leader. It doesn't go into what is management and what is leadership. It is really about what the role of a leader is. It is to getting a group of people to achieve common goals. Let's break this down, because in here you've got, and I've written it down specifically like that, in here you've got its four sides of leadership. Let me detail them for you so that you can understand better what your role is as a leader. Number one, it's about common goals. A group of people, if they get together as a team, they have this common goal that they want to achieve. And your role as a leader is to make sure that everybody captures this common goal and works towards it, right? The second thing, the second part of its four sides of leadership, it's about a group. It's a group of people. It's not a team yet. It's a group of people that have come together to work towards these common goals. And when they start working towards these common goals, and then when they start developing ways how they can be successful, that is when they start becoming a team. But the team, in the third side here, consists of a number of individuals. And as I said before, sometimes these individuals, they can be temporarily assigned to the team, to the group of people, or they can be permanently. It could easily be that they're distributed over different types of goals that they're trying to achieve, in the sense of they belong to different teams. In any case, it's about the individuals, it's about the people. And the fourth element, it's all about achieving the common goals, naturally. And these are what I call its four sides of leadership. This is what your role, what your contribution is. It's about making sure everybody, this group of people, everybody around you, they understand the common goals, they find a way how to reach that. The individuals, the people, are there to achieve what is being expected of them. Let's have a look at that in detail. The common goals. What is your role in detail? Because while you might see, yeah, I understand that, the success on your role is all about understanding what you can do in detail as a leader to contribute to make sure that this happens. So bear with me. I'm going to go through these four sides in detail so that you understand in detail what your role is. About common goals. Well, I said just a moment ago, we're this group of leaders. We were wondering, well, what is really, these competencies that people are discussing about communication, about decision making, about coaching, what really happens? And when is which competence required? Well, first up, when it's about common goals, it is much more about communicating the future goals rather than deciding about those. In fact, communication is here very important because it's about a dialogue between the goals and your group. And I understand very easily, some of you might think, yes, but wait a second, we got targets that we are committed to. That is correct. And the target by which the success is measured at the end of the year is, of course, very important for you to commit to. But your team and the way your team is achieving this target requires more than just the focus on a single number. It requires everybody to communicate and understand the details of this future goal. And I'll share more in detail in a second. When this future goal has been communicated, and you know when it has been communicated correctly, when everybody in your team knows what has to change and why it is important to change these things. When that is understood, then you can move to the second side and work more around the group of people. And your role here is very simple. It's about deciding how your group of people is going to use the resources that they have, their time, their competence, their cost, and perhaps any other machines and tools that are around them. Which means that together with your team, you want to decide on the group's priorities. And this becomes very important specifically for people who are working in different projects, for instance, who are literally time sharing their competence, because they are stuck in different priorities from different projects, and they have to negotiate these things with themselves and with others. So that is why it's a leader's role to make sure that these conflicts of priorities that occur when working with limited resources is actually solved. And when that is solved, then everybody in the team understands how are we as a team, with all the specialities, the limitations and the opportunities that we have, how are we as a team going to achieve the common goals? Now, when it's about the third side, the individuals and the people, You might say, yes, but when they understand the goals and when they know what the resources are, then they should be taking action. Correct. But not everybody takes action. Some people might be storming ahead already, that happens very often, and other people might be sitting around and waiting. And if you're a leader who is close to the people, you will understand that, well, you need everybody on the team to take their responsibility and act according to the priorities that you have set, which means not over consume the resources that the team has, but not under deliver when it's about the focus and the effort that everybody in the team is expecting from each and every one. So that is why, as a leader, you want to get close to your people to develop the condition for your people to act. And what I mean by that, specifically when you're working online, you might, after a while, you might realize that not everybody has the same capability, the same willingness, the same ability, the same tools to act according to the priorities. And that is where you, as a leader, you want to get close to your team and understand, okay, here I have to help Jim to develop how he's using a certain online tool so that he can do better presentations, for instance. Whereas on the other side, Gary, he is already well equipped and he can do online presentations without any limitation, as if it was out of the same room. You see, if you want to make sure that your team reaches the goals, the future goals, and you're leading your team to success, this is one of the essential tasks that you have out of these 4 leadership tasks. Which brings me to number 4, and that is achieving. Well, achieving means that everybody in the team, individual as well as a team, they have a feeling that there's some kind of follow-up happening on the past achievements. In particular, that everybody in the team knows, from you as their leader, everybody in the team knows how are you performing, and how much effort have you put in, and what contribution have you given, as much as how much is the team contributing and how much are they advancing towards the expected goals. You see, these are the 4 sides of leadership. And while you recognize these 4 sides and you have a better idea in detail what it really means, in reality, things are quite different. Because what I've discovered, and that is, in reality, people have their individual preference. And what does that mean? Well, it could look like some managers, they might be focusing on the goals, always communicating about the future, and then move across and start measuring the KPIs and the results in every meeting that they're having. And they're totally ignoring taking decisions around the strategies and the priorities and not helping the people to develop so that they can fulfill the tasks. You can imagine how the team feels working for such a manager. While this is quite common because it has been taught, leading by objectives, in a multicultural and a diverse team where people want help, where people want the leader to step in and take the decisions around certain conflicts of resources that that is when the team starts underperforming. And depending on where the focus are, it can be like somebody's focusing a lot around the decisions and measuring the results at the same time. It's called micromanagement. It could be that another manager is working on 3 sides of its 4 sides, but is not communicating enough about the targets, which creates a lot of confusion. It could be that there is a manager who's not focusing on the decisions enough to resolve this conflict of interest and conflict of resources that teams have when they're working in larger organizations. And it easily feels that the team's individuals, they get into conflict with their colleagues, trying to grab as much of the available resources as possible. Or you might have managers who do the formal part, the goal communication, the decision making and measuring the results, but they have delegated the development of the people to another department like HR. And then they wonder why they're not succeeding with their teams as much as they would like when it's about achieving and reaching the common goals. And you can imagine that if nobody is interested about the results and the efforts and the contributions that the people are doing, it ends up like motivation is going down the drain because nobody feels that they're being heard or that being listened to. These 4 sides I have defined as the most important part when you start and when you are a leader. It's like you have to know where your north is when you get started. You have to know where east is in the morning so that you know how to prioritize things. You have to know that your people are working out there in the sun at midday, and you have to know when you're having a sundowner and looking at the sunset. You have to know and be able to share how the people have given and contributed with their efforts. These are the 4 sides. These are the leader's success compass, which you would like to know, and specifically you would like to balance for the future. Because think about it this way. If you always look east, you will never see a sunset. And that is why trying to find the balance here in the future goals and deciding on the priorities and developing your people and following up on the past achievements is so essential. Because while you might prefer 1 or 2 sides of this, it doesn't mean that your people prefer the same sides, because people are different. And when you can balance and focus your attention in the different meetings on the different sides, then you're increasing the opportunity to lead your team to success more than anybody else. So for now, I'm going to focus on 2 elements exactly out of this leadership's success compass, so that we can have a clearer view of what it really means to communicate future goals, for instance. And that is why I'm going to answer for you 2 questions. Question number 1 is how to gather your team to focus on the goals so that they work more independently. And question number 2 that I'm going to answer for you is how to develop your people so that they're more self-driven and in line with the priorities. Let's start with number 1. And for number 1, we have to have a look into the north side and about communicating the future goals. And that is where I teach about the true north navigator. Because these are the elements that you would want to apply in detail if you want to make sure that you completely communicate the common goals. And the True North Navigator goes by the acronym of NORTH, N-O-R-T-H. And it has 5 elements. It's about defining the new norm. It's about knowing the orientation to where your team is. It's about judging the reality. It's about defining a target. And for the communication, very important, about bringing about a heartfelt message in your communication. Now, this is going to be way more than we are able to cover in the time that we have today. That's why I'm going to focus here on the first one, about the new norm, because everybody's been talking about the new norm of digitalization, the new norm about doing business, the new norm, whatever the new norm is for you. And let me give you an example. Let's assume, who likes pizza? Okay, let's assume that on Fridays you like preparing pizza for your family, like at the end of the week, a thing that you do with your family. And everybody likes your pizza, and you're wondering, okay, I would like to invite my friends over for pizza as well. Now, of course, you would like to produce your best pizza for your friends. But hand on heart, I know when I prepare dinner for my family. Sometimes it's really great and everybody loves it, and even I'm satisfied. But then there are other Fridays when it didn't quite work out and I didn't really quite understand what it is. But my family is nice to me and they say, oh, it was great. But in reality, what I produced the other Friday, I wouldn't want to serve to my friends. So I really have to be sort of a top notch when I serve to my friends. And if my friends really like it, and after a couple of, evenings having great pizza with my friends, somebody might come up with the idea and say, well, why don't you deliver pizza? And that's sort of like getting up another notch when it's about the performance that I'm delivering, because then I have to really 100% make sure that I'm on top of my performance. And what this new norm is talking about is making the steps from normal, accepting what is like okay, and moving step by step from one peak performance to the next peak performance. So one peak performance, like serving for my friends, the next one serving in a delivery, the third one serving in a restaurant, and so on and so on. Every time I have to step up my performance. And the only way to do that is to apply a proven recipe. I need to know the recipe for success, because that is the best way to repeat your success. And how you do that is a tool that I would like to share with you, where you go from the norm to peak performance, working with the acronym of PEAK, P-E-A-K. And this is a tool that you can apply in a workshop with your team so that they can grasp more about what is it really that you're trying to achieve, other than being measured on a KPI at the end of the season. It consists of 4 elements. First, you would want to understand what does perfect really mean. And normal in this case isn't good enough. That is why you have a goal. And if you want to up your performance by, let's say, 15%, if you want to down your inefficiency by 10%, whatever it is, it always means you're changing your level of performance from where you are right now, and you're targeting the next peak. After that, you might target the next peak again. But right now, we're targeting a peak that is at the end of your project, at the end of the trimester, the season, or the year, whatever it is. So sit down with your team and start describing what is perfect. Maybe you've done that already. Maybe you've leisurely had that discussion, but I urge you to go in detail around what does this perfect pizza really mean? What's the crust like? What's the topping like? What is the cheese like? What type of salami do you want to have on it? What type of tomato sauce is there? Describe it in detail. Second thing, the E, it's all about understanding the effect of a sequence of steps to making it perfect. Experience here plays a big role. And it doesn't mean that everybody in your team has the same experience, but it does mean that together you can decide on a sequence of preparing this recipe that is essential. Because let's make it simple. You cannot put the ingredients of the dough into the oven and put it on to 300 and expect it's going to be a great pizza. You have to do something with it. You have to prepare that dough. And before you prepare that dough, you might want to buy the ingredients, and so on and so on. So there's a certain effective sequence that you want to agree with your team that needs to be considered. Third thing here is, after you have that sequence, you want to take a look at the actions. What is required for every step in this effective sequence to make it work? And funnily enough, maybe you as well, you're watching these different cooking videos on Instagram. There are loads of them. And they always give this perfect picture. They give you a sequence how they produce it, and they also give you the show in the video the actions that they do. But then there's one thing that is missing, and it drives me crazy every time, because every time I try to copy one of these recipes, I fail because the fourth thing is missing. And that is where your experience and the experience of your team and practice plays a huge role. And that is, what is the key ingredient with every action that you want to define to make sure that this action is successful? Because without this key ingredient, without this key competence, without this key, the magic sauce, it is not going to be peak. It's only going to be normal. So you can do this in a workshop. I don't mean a whole day workshop. You can discuss this and brainstorm this with your team in like 30 minutes. And the result of this is exactly where you're going to start to create your recipe for success with your team. And without this recipe of success, you're going to see that the discussions in your meetings are going to continue around, well, what is really our goal? And why is this important? Can't we have another goal? And what about the deadlines? Are they really and the measurements and so on? You will see that if the first step, the difference between what is normal and what is the new norm, if that is not clear so that people can answer what has to change and why is that important, your team cannot be effective because you're revisiting the discussions again and again. This is one part of the Leader Success Compass. And if you want to understand and experience more parts, I invite you to follow its 4 Sides of Leadership. You can buy the book, or you can sign up for free on its 4 Sides of Leadership on Teams. And there I'm going to give you my free audiobook about speaking the language of leadership. The whole story of this group of management team and middle managers who are visited for 2 years as a story so that they became really great leaders. You can see with free online training how you can get started as a leader. And if I do get around to do a masterclass, I will invite you exclusively to a masterclass. And to make this possible, you log in you go onto the page, it's 4sides.com and /letmelead. And then when you register there, I will take you into the group so that you have these 4 elements. Now, question number 2, if you remember, how to develop your people so that they're more self-driven and in line with the priorities. When it's about the Leader Success Compass, now we're having a look here at the South. And the South means how you can develop the people in line to act with the priorities. And with the priorities, remember, it's about what cost limitations you have, what priorities when it's about their attitude, their competence, the time they're spending, whatever it is. This is where you'd want to observe your people to see, well, what is it they're really doing in detail? Are they doing what is expected according to the priorities? That is why I've created something here that I call the People's Motivational Map Scanner. Yes, I know this is expecting a lot, but in principle, wouldn't it be great if you had tools so that you could understand your people's and even your own motivational map? Because when you knew your motivational map, you could take the next step, move ahead to the next crossing and increase your motivation. So let's have a look to see what's in this motivational map scanner. And you might have guessed already, yes, it does go by the acronym of SOUTH, SOUTH, and it has 5 elements. First of all, you want to make sure, and you can check this in dialogues with the individuals. You want to make sure that it makes sense to the people. You want to check if there is any offset to what they're doing. You'd want to undo any of this. You want to help them develop the thoughts that they have so that they can move forward. And in the end, maybe you have to even help them change a habit or two so that they can be more successful. Because at the end of this sequence, at the end of this side, everybody on the team would like to have a feeling, I can be successful in doing these tasks. Because when they cannot get this feeling of being successful, they will focus on something else that they are sure of that they can be successful with. And that might not be the tasks that you're expecting them to do. I would like to pinpoint one here, and that is the offset. Because very often you realize after a couple of meetings that things are not really going well. It's not happening as quickly, it's not happening with the right framework, it's not happening in the right cost base, it doesn't happen with the time that you're expecting, whatever it is. Whatever it is, there is an offset between what you're expecting versus to where it is really happening. And the best is described as an offset is when you're sailing. See, if you're sailing north, but you have an offset because of the wind and you're sailing more to westward, what is going to happen? I didn't realize that when I was sailing with the crew at night and on my boat, and I decided that at 2 o'clock we would change shifts, and asked a friend of mine, Patrick, who I believed was competent enough to steer my boat, to take over. And I was lying in my bunk, and I was listening to the waves gurgling around the bow, and I was slumbering into sleep gradually, until a moment there was an almighty crash, and I literally fell out of my bunk, grabbed my glasses, put them on, and went up to see in the cockpit what was happening. I quickly looked to both sides of the boat, and even behind me I could only see white water. The boat was heeling, the main sheet was dropped half, it was flapping, and I looked at my crew and only saw white faces around them. There was this deafening noise coming occasionally, this crunching and grinding noise coming from the bottom of the boat. And every time there was a wave lifting the boat and letting it tilt again, it was another crunch, and it was the rudder crunching on a rock in the water. I ordered everybody as quickly as possible to the front of the boat to make sure that we could equalize the balance of the boat a little bit so that the rudder wouldn't be destroyed. And I moved behind the wheel to see where we were. One view on the GPS screen, it was as white as the faces of the crew that had now assembled on the foredeck. 2-button strike, and I could see the picture of the GPS recenter around the boat. Rocks around us. What had happened? Obviously, Patrick, who was steering the boat, had lost his sense of orientation in the middle of the night on the GPS, trying to zoom in, zoom out, zoom up, zoom down, wherever he was, but he didn't know that instead of sailing north, that he was supposed to be doing, he had an offset of 15 degrees, and he ran into some shallows with rocks. That is where we stuck. I didn't know how little Patrick knew about steering my boat and using the tools. And when you are a leader of your team, you want to make sure that you correct the reasons for an offset immediately. Now, in business, this is very often discussed around, well, what competence does the team have? And Patrick, obviously, he had some elements of competence that were missing. And what is discussed around the competence is that maybe there's functional competence that people need. Maybe there's competence around communication that is required, professional experience, or even competence around self-leadership. And I have been in this situation working for an HR department in the same situation that we were discussing these different reasons how to develop competence. And a competence project with an HR department typically works like this. You ask some of the key heads in business what is the competence that they expect that teams should have, and you create this long list. Then you go and ask the people who are relevant to these roles with all this long list of competence to grade themselves how much competence they think they have in these types of areas. And then as a third step, you go back to the managers and they counter grade each and every individual in what they believe the level of expectation is that they have. And then you give it all back to HR, this whole list with the different values, and you ask HR to cluster training around these different areas. And then something really, really interesting happens, because HR typically doesn't have the competence to drive these trainings. They're not set up to have the budget to drive these trainings, and they realize that this is going to take much longer than all the managers would expect, which means that the whole idea of developing competence in a team or in an organization just fizzles out amongst many other low prioritized activities in an organization. And then I ask myself, but wait a second, you with your team, aren't you responsible so that the people can develop and have the capability that they require so that they can be successful? Why would you want to delegate? The most important reason why your team fails to somebody who doesn't have any business connection. So what is required here is that as a leader, and it doesn't really matter if you're a project manager or if you are a temporary leader or a department head, you would want to read your people's capability. And I mean by really reading, so that when you interact with them, you've got this in mind, this tool, so that you can decide for yourself, Patrick, he doesn't have the right competence to be reliable in working with the GPS system. And this is where it starts. And the READ tool goes by READ, obviously, by this acronym. And the first thing that you would want to check with your people, it's like when you have somebody like a new hire, you would want to make sure, you would want to have a list of those tools and methods and competencies that have to be in place so that this new hire, in this case Patrick, who was steering my boat, is reliable enough so that they don't make mistakes. Because every time that they would make a mistake, they would have to come running up to you asking to have this mistake fixed, or to a colleague asking to having the mistake fixed, or you would discover the mistake like I did way too late and I had to fix it. Reliability, getting things right from the start, is the most important area where you'd want to start in helping the people to develop their competence. Now, many people, especially when they experience, they're very reliable. They get a lot of things right. But still, check if they're doing the things right. Ask them where they're spending their time, because very often a new tool is introduced, people don't have the time to educate themselves on new software tools, and you think they are reliable, but in fact they are not. Because the worst thing that you would want to have then is that somebody who is trying to use tools is that they find themselves in the situation where they actually should be more efficient in what they do. And efficient means that they're able to do a greater workload. They contribute with more value. They have more experience to take more work on. But if they're not doing everything correctly, doing things faster is a recipe for disaster. So the second thing that you would want to check here is, is the person exposed to the experience so that they can gradually take on more tasks efficiently? Do you challenge them so that they see for themselves which task they can do faster? That is really where the professional experience comes in. Because the professional experience means that somebody who's on that job, they add a lot of value to their role. That is really what gets people hired. Making mistakes here is quite the contrary. So the third thing that is required after noticing that somebody is reliable and they're efficient in doing what they're doing is taking the perspective of nobody is doing a task on their own. They always have to communicate with others. So that is where the third thing of your observation can come in to help read people's capability. It's the A. It is a little bit, but it's not attitude. In fact, it's about the approach that they take in communicating with others. Because having an approach that is considerate with others by writing an email, running a meeting, on the telephone call, or in chat messages, helps a person to get more people involved and more people motivated to contribute to the task, to the project they're running. And this is where a lot of communication tools, of course, happen. And that is where it becomes specific then in this development. Well, how do you write an email to your to the key stakeholders? How do you write an email confirming tasks and appreciating what you have done to your team members, and so on? The fourth thing that you would want to consider when it's about reading a person's capability, apart from getting things right, being efficient and fast at doing things and adding value, and having a smooth and friendly, a considered approach, is, are they able and do they have the frame of taking decisions for themselves? Because when they have a frame to take decisions for themselves, rather than coming running to you and saying, can I do this? Am I allowed to do that? That is when they really become independent. Now, everybody likes to be independent, and I really appreciate my people to be independent. But I have to check these three things first, because I cannot allow somebody to take the decisions by themselves if they don't have these three things in place. And the last one, when it's about themselves having a framework to take decisions, this is really where leadership, specifically self-leadership, plays a role. That is why I, as a leader, set a framework and say, okay, if you don't know where you are on your GPS, you wake me up. If you've been sailing for 5 minutes and you don't know where you are and you're still on the same track, you better wake me up. These types of rules have to be clear to you as a leader, as much as they have to be clear to each and every one on your team. This is how you can read the people's capability and act accordingly, helping them to get things right, developing experience so that they can be more efficient, taking a look at the approach they're having with their co-workers, and setting a frame around which decisions can they take independently. And if you want to know where you'd want to start, well, obviously you want to start with teaching what is right at the beginning. So this was the second tool that I've been sharing with you about its 4 sides of leadership. And I know we could be spending days around these things. And actually, part of my program, Its 4 Sides of Leadership, goes into the North and the East and the South and the West individually with tools like these that you've seen, like reading the people's capabilities, so that you have a clear recipe how you can be successful and repeat, so that you are really the one who's leading the team to success. Because at the end, when you've gone through It's 4 Sides of Leadership. Everyone needs to know what has to happen. Why is it important? That's the north. They would want to know, how will we do this together? That's the east. How can I be successful? That's in the south. And how are we doing it? And how am I doing right now, having the feedback? That is the west. And if you like this type of information, I invite you to sign up for free on It's 4 Sides of Leadership on Teams, where you can get free audiobook, Speaking the Language of Leadership, where you can, if you're starting out as a manager, or even if you have experience, you can capture some free online training there. Everything is already there. And possibly I can invite you to an invitation, send you an invitation to a masterclass on leadership. And all you have to do, totally free, no expectations, is to go to the page, it's 4sides.com, let me lead, and fill in the form there, and I will take over from there. So this has been my presentation to you about It's 4 Sides of Leadership. As a summary, you can be the one, irrespective of your personality, and learn tools so that you can be the one who's leading a team to success. Because that is what I like to do. I like to coach leaders so that they can be the one who's leading a team to success. So don't hesitate to sign up for it's4sides.com. Let me lead. Thank you very much for joining, and see you soon.